Yes, I thought I'd do this video today on the subject of impeachment, which is sort of lost. People have given up on impeaching Cheney or Bush or holding any of them accountable. Well, so I was curious to see how many books had been written on impeachment. I went to Amazon.com, and there are quite a few. So I've got them here. Oh, here's John Conyers' book. He's written 2 books on impeachment. This is the one where Elizabeth Holtzman wrote she's was involved in the Nixon impeachment. She's a Republican, by the way. Then the second book by Conyers has got a forward, okay. Well, this is. Well, I guess I'm wrong. Okay, Conyers only wrote a forward, and Joseph Wilson wrote the introduction. So those are the 2 books, and then there's a bunch. Here's the Center for Constitutional Rights on articles of impeachment. The other. Oh, John Dean. John Dean thinks. John Dean was in the Nixon administration. He thinks that this administration, Bush administration, is worse than the Nixon administration. More secretive, more evil, more destructive, etc. This book here that I'm showing you by Jack Goldsmith. Jack Goldsmith was a lawyer in the Justice Department, in the Bush Justice Department, when they were discussing the wiretapping, the secret wiretapping, and the torture, and all of that stuff. Oh, here's a book here. This is an edited book about impeachment, edited a collection of articles. And you can see the bunch of different contributors, maybe 20 different contributors all doing articles. And actually, I'd like to get that book. Well, and I have to say in a disclaimer here, I've only gotten through John Dean's book, Worse Than Watergate. Yeah, that's the one that I've gotten through. This one here, End of America, I've looked at it. And then another book, Frank Rich. A Frank Rich book. John Ritter. Here's John Ritter. John Ritter was the weapons inspector during Clinton's period, during Clinton administration, who knew about the WMD in Iraq, etc. And then he came out against the Iraq War, said there weren't any WMD there. They had all been destroyed, or they were very old and useless. Seymour Hersh. That was the previous one. I'm one book behind every time. Seymour Hersh, investigative journalist, talking about detainees, endless detention of people who are innocent, sort of a gulag, kind of like the Soviet Union had when they threw. Well, this last book here, I'm using it because it talks in the title talks about the Downing Street memo, and also the Conyers book talks about the Downing Street memo. The Downing Street memo is shockingly few people in the United States have read it. The mainstream media ignored it. The United States mainstream media ignored the Downing Street memo when it was leaked to the British press. It was a big splash in the British press. Downing Street memo basically said that the United States had decided in early 2002 to go to war with Iraq, and it didn't care why it went to war with Iraq, or whether it was a good idea, or what would happen, or how many troops were needed. It was just going to go to war with Iraq. And that's in the Downing Street memo. Every American ought to read the Downing Street memo. I'll put it in the box probably. I'm going to end by quoting from a book It's the Beyond the Green Zone, and it's by a guy who actually went to Iraq to find out what was going on, and he's a journalist. He wrote about it. Let me just read you. In 2002, winter began to sound across the United States. And the drumbeat for war became deafening. He was living in Anchorage. I spent much of my free time reading the news from abroad and getting it from alternative media channels. The cheerleading for war, feebly disguised as journalism, that corporate media television stations and newspapers in the United States spewed, was intolerable. The overwhelming evidence was already available. There were not and had not been weapons of mass destruction in Iraq for years. The make-believe link between Saddam Hussein and 9/11 was a chimera. The excuse given later, that of liberating the people of Iraq, held even less true. Nevertheless, illusions were maintained by a media in the United States that had sunk to being little more than state stenographers, giddily scribbling and announcing the diktats of George Bush and his administration. Thousands of years of Iraq's rich history were cursorily omitted from the media and replaced by the graphic of a U.S.-installed dictator with a bullseye in his forehead. The worldwide protests of February 15th, 2003, the largest in human history, Bush brushed aside as a focus group. Oh, okay, well, I'm almost out of time here. His editor in Anchorage, Alaska, the author of this book, was fired because the articles they were writing were too, quote-unquote, political. I think that means that they were too truthful, too critical of the administration. He left Alaska and went to Iraq, and he started to write about the war in Iraq. And fortunately, this is a pretty good book. I'm getting through it. But Beyond the Green Zone, he was an unembedded journalist, which means he was telling what he saw. And he was talking to actual Iraqis, not just the military people. Okay, over and out.